Dear friends of the NIA, welcome to this very special evening featuring our last public event for the spring 2026. But it's a very important event. It's the second lecture in honor of Professor Øivind Andersen. It's the Eivind Andersen Lecture Series. And we're very happy to have the guest of honor with us tonight, Professor Eivind. For those who are newcomers, I should say that Professor Øivind Andersen, among other things during his long academic and scholarly career, has been the founder and the first director of the Norwegian Institute at Athens back in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. Let me say a few words about the series. This is something that was able to happen due to the idea and diligent work of my colleague, Dr. Zafiriadis, who set the idea in motion last year. So in May 2025, we launched the series. And last year, we were proud to have Anastasia Maravella, professor of classics at the University of Oslo, and a former student of Eivind Andersen. Oops, it's a special event. But this year, we are also very proud to present Professor Eivind Seland from the University of Bergen this time. But most importantly, the chairman of our advisory board in Norway. So let me say a few words about this new addition to the Institute's resources. The advisory board was established in 2022 to facilitate the Institute's academic work, mostly projects, networking with Norway, and publications. So thank you very much on behalf of all of us for chairing this board since the summer 2025. Professor Eivind Seland, it's difficult to frame all his interests in a very modest, short biographical note. He's a professor of ancient history and Premodern global history at the University of Bergen, the Department of Archaeology, History, Cultural Studies, and Religion. His research interests include the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, thus the lecture tonight, which he tackles as very important and challenging maritime environments back in ancient times, particularly when it comes to navigators, how they did it. By drawing on geography, ethnography, and history, Eivind Seland will present some of the aids that assisted their task during times that escape our knowledge and attention. Furthermore, Eivind is interested in the Hellenistic and Roman Near East, environmental history, apparently, and not least, reception of ancient history and use of ancient history in later periods. So please join me in welcoming Professor Seland, who will take it forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Delia. It's really a great honor to be here for this lecture series in honor of Øivind Andersen. And it's always a pleasure to visit the Norwegian Institute in Athens. I've been coming back here ever since I was a master student. I think the first time I was here was in 1999. And it's always lovely to be here. Today, I will be addressing an old problem, but in a setting where it hasn't been that much discussed before. Namely, how did ancient navigators find their way without any maps or instruments? We'll be talking not about the region where this has mostly been discussed, that is the ancient Mediterranean, but about the Red Sea. And I'm going to present two different arguments. One is about how you could use visual navigation aids in order to find your way. And the other is about what you would do when you didn't have any visual navigation aids. And in order to do that, I will be drawing on three groups of evidence. The first is ancient texts describing the Red Sea region. The second is colonial period and early modern period maps and sailing descriptions. And the third is modern GIS tools. And together, I think these give us a rare opportunity to say not only something about what people did in ancient periods, but also how they did it and why they did it the way they did. Really, my talk today is put together by three studies. The latter part of the talk, which is about GIS and viewsheds, is based on a paper published in a book on the book series of the Institute a few years ago in a festgift for my teacher, Jørgen Christian Meyer. The first part, which will be on visual navigation aids, is going to be published in another festgift for Professor Steve Sidebotham, who has been excavating in Bergen in Egypt for, I think now, or since the 1990s, yes, more than 30 years. It should have been out this spring, but it has been delayed. And there's also elements from a third paper that I will be developing, which is about topographies of power and how place names reflect the efforts of Greeks and Romans in the Hellenistic and Roman period to appropriate the geographical space of the Red Sea when they came there and took over. Some of you, I'm sure, have seen varieties of this map before. It shows in which parts of the Mediterranean and Black Sea where you can retain visual contact with shore and where you are too far away. So in present-day Ukraine, on the steppes, you have a very short distance from shore that you can keep visual contact with land. But down on Sicily, you can Mount Etna is, I think, more than 3,000 meters tall, and you have a very, very long distance where it's possible to know where the shore is. And mind you, this is under ideal conditions, and we all know that conditions are not ideal all the time, but this is a theoretical exercise. I guess it's most famous now for being used in Perry Horden and Nicholas Purcell's book, The Corrupting Sea from 2001. But in another book from Norwegian Institute in Athens, Ruben Brugge has traced the original to 1901 map drawn by a German geographer called Ludwig Henkel. And what we can learn from this is that unless you are going north-south in the Mediterranean, that's the Black Sea, you would theoretically be able to keep visual contact with the coasts at all times. And this feeds into another discussion about how did ancient navigation in the Mediterranean take place. Would they sail during the daytime and then put in at night, like the Athenians do with their triremes when they are traveling around in the Aegean in the Peloponnesian Wars, for instance? Or would they sail through the night and cross the open sea? And this is also connected with what has been called the primitivist modernist controversy in ancient economies. How developed were their technology and their know-how. So today we know that they would both travel on the coast and they would also cross the sea. It's one thing to draw a flat-bottom warship up on a smooth beach You have more problems if you have a big ship. The small trading ship, it's the reconstruction of the Kyrenia ship, or one of the reconstructions was found of Cyprus. And also, with the technology of those days, this is a Greek anchor from Piraeus on the left, and a Roman anchor from the Western Mediterranean from present-day Spain on the right. But also they apparently didn't have anchor chains. They used ropes, and they would be vulnerable. So it would be difficult to anchor your ship safely for the night. And also recent work like that of Pascal Wanking in Trier University, and also the people behind the Stanford Orbis project, have argued that they would travel across the open sea, that you would have more or less established routes or highways, for instance, from the Messina Straits and straight across the sea to Africa, and from there onwards to Egypt. But they would also use the shorelines to orient them. Anna Koller has studied the distribution of place names that are related to Mount Cassius, which is on the border between present-day Turkey and Syria. And she finds them in many places around the Mediterranean and argues that they are an artifact of very early Phoenician trade networks that would take the big holy mountain from the Levant and then transplants it symbolically to other places. Pascal Arnaud is a great expert on ancient sailing practices, argues that as they had no maps, they would learn from knowledge transfer between master and apprentice normally, and they would study the coastal reliefs, but also use the waves, the shape of the waves, the direction of the currents, the speed of the currents, the color of the sea, the presence of birds and wildlife, and these things to know where they were when they were moving around. So, heading to the Red Sea, the name is of ancient origin. It's called the Erythra Thalassa in Greek and the Mare Rubrum in Latin. It is a stretch of water that separates Arabia from Africa and the Indian Ocean from the Mediterranean. And it's part of the great geological rift that goes all the way from East Africa up through the Red Sea and across the Levant to southern Turkey. And it becomes just a little bit larger all the time as these continental plates drift apart from each other. It's more than 2,000 kilometers long, going all the way from present-day Yemen and Eritrea and the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb that you've heard about. They're not quite as famous as the Hormuz Strait, but it's another bottleneck in navigation. And it goes then up to Suez in Egypt and Aqaba Ayla in Jordan and Israel. And as you can see, it's much more narrow than it's wide. It's about 260 kilometers wide on the widest between Saudi Arabia and Sudan and Eritrea. And then it's more like 60 kilometers in the more narrower parts, and even narrower than that in the straits. Extremely deep in the middle, more than 3,000 meters. But it's challenging to navigate for several reasons. First, we have very arid coasts, so there is nowhere to get water or provisions of food, and very few permanent settlements as you move along the Red Sea. And also because of the quite narrow shape and the tall coastal mountains, they are between around 1,000 meters in the north in Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and up to more than almost 3,000 meters in Yemen and southern Saudi Arabia. It creates kind of a wind tunnel that creates strong winds and frequent gales. But the worst problem is probably the reefs, because it's very deep in the middle, but then you have continental shelves that are very shallow, and all the blue areas on the modern navigation chart here are coral reefs that thrive in this tropical water. And that's, of course, what makes it so popular for divers and snorkelers today. But for sailing, it was a very real threat. Still, it was used for navigation all the way back at least to the Egyptian Middle Kingdom period, where we have inscriptions and bioarchaeological evidence and also iconographic evidence of the trips to the region of Punt in the southern Red Sea, where they would go to get aromatics. It appears first in Greek literature in Herodotus, who writes about an expedition taking place during the rule of the last pharaoh of Egypt, Necho, who sent a crew of Phoenician sailors to sail around Africa. They would return 2 years later, he writes, after going all the way around South Africa. We don't know if that's true, but it certainly have been possible to do. They wanted to go to the Red Sea because there are resources there. In the south, you have aromatic resins like frankincense and myrrh, and also other things. In those days, you had elephants and thus also ivory in present-day Sudan and Eritrea and Somalia. There are pearls in the Red Sea, and there are also gemstones in many places and minerals. Also, the Red Sea was on the way to somewhere else, out into the Indian Ocean, where you could get access to Indian textiles and spices and aromatics that were attractive to people in the Mediterranean. Gemstones also were an important object of trade. So the Red Sea became part of the Greek world from Alexander's conquests in the 4th century BC, and it remained so until the Islamic conquest of Egypt in the 7th century. So that's actually a millennium of Greek history in the Red Sea. And you could also argue that continued to be an important place for Greeks long after that. Greeks maintained a prominent presence in the region as traders, but also as professionals, for instance, as doctors and lawyers up into the Ottoman period. And of course, there was a large Greek population, particularly in Egypt, but also in other Red Sea countries until the nationalist governments after World War II forced them out, and they went to Greece or to Australia or to the US, most of them. Then certainly there were people already living in the Red Sea. In the Greek text, they're called ichthyophagoi, fish eaters, or troglodytes that might or might not be related to troglodytes or cave dwellers, but there were local people living there. And also, of course, settled agricultural populations in present-day Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Yemen that were trading with the people who came from the north. I have two small snippets of texts here. One is from, both are from Agatharchides of Cnides' book on the Red Sea, probably written in the 2nd century BC, and only preserved in fragments in Strabo and Diodorus and also some parts of it in Pliny. And the first says it's a description of the Arabian coast of the Red Sea. It says a mountain range with sheer and frightening high rocks on its summits runs along this coast. At its base are numerous sharp rocks in the sea. And the second, which is on the coast of present-day Sudan or Eritrea, says that the region, and that would be the approximately here, where you see there's a lot of blue, a lot of reefs on the map. The region presents no problems for all ships, but the elephant transports, which ride deep in the water, or running with sails set and often continuing through the night because of the strong winds, they are wrecked when they run aground on the rocks or submerged, because these stone anchors I showed you would likely not be able to hold them still for the night. And we'll return to that afterwards. I'll just show you this beautiful little mosaic of an elephant ship. I don't think they can have looked exactly like that. There was actually a trade in, of course, in ivory, but also during the Ptolemaic period in live elephants that were going to be used for their wars with the Seleucid Empire. And especially Ptolemy II put up a large program to procure these elephants with hunting stations in present-day Sudan, Eritrea, all the way down to Somaliland. And we have even papyrological evidence of people traveling with these elephant transports and having to wait there for for the next crew to take over at the hunting station, because the Elephantagos had wrecked on the way. So this is not just some literary topos, it is things that actually would happen. So how did they try to navigate this seascape? And we'll start with this visual navigation aids. The most important source of information would be the topography of the coasts. They could sail on the coast and they could see and recognize places there. And this small excerpt says, after sailing past these places, 5 mountains separate from each other rise high. Their peaks narrow to rocky knolls, producing an appearance similar to the pyramids in Egypt. The explorer Hermann von Hermann von Wissmann believes that this refers to a part of the Saudi Arabian coast just south of Jeddah today. And the same mountains you find on this French map, the Carte Générale de la Mer Rouge, from the end of the 18th century. And what we can do is that we have these short snippets of ancient texts, but we can understand how they worked by reading the texts from people who were traveling there in the mainly the 18th and 19th century, who also didn't have as good navigation aids as they would have later, and would also rely on the coastal relief in order to find their way. There are more examples of early modern navigation maps. So this is a real charted map, like they didn't have in the ancient period, but they would have these pictures of what the coast would look like to make it possible to see where they were. And we have a lot of place names that remind us of this, like the Pentadactylus Mons, or Five-Finger Mountains, mentioned by Pliny. It's also in Ptolemy's geography. We have the Mons Tricorifos, three-headed mountain, also mentioned in Pliny's natural history. We have an island called Burnt Island that I will tell you more about later, which was a volcanic island that we can also identify today. And we have place names like Berenike Epidires, Berenike on the neck, which likely refers to this small peninsula on the Bab el Mandeb, which is an example of what I told you, that they use their dynastic and also mythological names from especially the Ptolemaic world, but also the wider Greek world, and they transplant them to a Red Sea seascape as they approach that. And they really had good information. Strabo mentions that in the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, there are 6 small islands when you go south along the African coast. And those are the 6 islands that for some reason now is called the Seven Brothers Islands. Likely they have the hill here counted as the 7th brother in the Arabic name. To show you how this actually worked, bear with me when we go a bit out of what we call the Red Sea today, because the Greeks, they called also the Western Indian Ocean the Red Sea. So this satellite image shows the view sheds of 2 prominent geographical features, one in Yemen and one in present-day Somalia in the Gulf of Aden. When we turn to our texts, we learn that these have names. The one in present-day Yemen is called Acroterion Syagros. In Arabic, it's Ras Fartak, and both means the Cape of the Boar. While the other one in Somalia is called Acroterion Elephas, Ras Filuk in Arabic, Capo Elefanto in Portuguese, and Cape Elephant in English. So we have a continuing tradition over 2,000 years with the same toponym in different languages, which attests to how these names were transferred from pilots to pilots and merchants to merchants. But what we need to remember is that these people did not have satellite images or maps. They saw the world from the deck of a ship. And I would love to go there on a ship. I've never been there on a ship, but you can also use modern technology to see how the relief would look like. And then it suddenly becomes very understandable why the cape got the name after the boar. This headland is more than 1,000 meters high and would be visible from a very great distance. Maybe even more evident with the one in present-day Somalia, the Cape Elephant, which has very much the shape of the elephant they came there to hunt. So it's a fascinating insight into how they were doing this in practical terms. They also had other options. We see evidence of them using the sea and the wildlife to find their way around. Again, a small snippet from Agatharchidas. Not more than 3 fathoms depth and extremely green in color. People say this phenomenon does not occur because the nature of the water is such a sort as a result of abundant seaweed and vegetation that is visible under the water. If we go to early modern texts, we can read about how Arabic ships would put their outlook at the front of the boat to always look out for reefs when they were sailing. And on the French map I showed you, you have many regions that say that you have black sand, sable noir, that would be visible to people sailing, because the coastal shelf is quite shallow, and because of the lack of rivers feeding into the Red Sea, it has a very deep visibility. It's very clear water there, which is also why it was so popular with divers, of course. Another fun example, this is from the Periplos of the Erythraean Sea, Greek language text from the Roman period describing navigation in Western Indian Ocean. And now I moved out of the Red Sea proper again and over to the mouth of the Indus River, where they say that when you approach this coast, which is very low, so you cannot see the coast, but you will see sea snakes who approach the boat when you get close to the coasts. And this we find also on early modern maps, like in this snippet here. And you could believe that this was only a tale of sea monsters, but these snakes also actually exist there, as we can read in more modern navigation guides. We also have man-made structures that would help people navigate. This is a drawing from a map in a 9th century manuscript of the 6th century text of Cosmas Indicopleustes, Christian Topography, where he writes about the kingdom of Aksum in present-day Ethiopia and Eritrea, where he visits the port of Adulis. And it is a proper map. It has south on the top. Adulis is here, and if you turn it around, it would fit well with the coastline you see here. So here the navigator would have had different settlements. He would likely be able to see the churches that are depicted here. Cosmas also describes these Greek inscriptions of Ptolemy II about his elephant hunts there. So that was then 7th centuries before Ptolemy visited. It's generally taken to be a genuine inscription. So of course, it hasn't been found in modern times. And you also have that throne with a Greek inscription that stands on a hill there that he also describes as a landmark you could use to get around. And such places, such structures we also find in other places. We have toponyms, place names like the Leukikome, the White Village, which was probably in present-day Saudi Arabia, in the place now called Ainuna. This is, of course, not an ancient structure, but they have a white mosque here, just to illustrate how you could see things from the sea. At the outlet of the Red Sea, at the Bab el-Mandeb, you have a pillar of Sesostris, described in Strabo. There is supposed to be a mountaintop temple of Sesostris in present-day Sudan or southern Egypt, visible from the sea. No, sorry, a temple of Isis. We have these inscriptions described by Cosmas and also by Agatharchius from Egyptian and other rulers of the past. And of course from Berenike in Egypt, which was the main Greek and Roman port on the Red Sea coast of Egypt. You have now found quite a lot of inscriptions. And these could not, of course, be seen by the navigators. They would be able to see the buildings and the temples. But the inscriptions would also be a part of this process of making the Red Sea their own and appropriating this maritime space. Here there is way too much text for you to read. I'm very aware of that, and I'm not asking you to do that, but there is a very touching story of what happens to these elephant transports when they run aground. So I said they are deep in the water and they're not able to anchor up at night, so they wreck. And the sailors cannot go ashore because the water is too deep from them. And there's nothing to find on the shore anyway. And then the tides bring sand that builds up around the ship. So the ship becomes stuck there. And also people don't dare to approach them to help them because it's dangerous to go there. And they then die horrible deaths on the reefs after thirsting or starving to death. And we then learn that these ships, thus pitifully deprived of their crews, remain like cenotaphs for a long time, buried on all sides in sand. With their sails and masts set, they impelled pity and sympathy for the dead sailors, people who see them from afar, for there is a royal decree that they elect as markers to signal to mariners the places that produce destruction. So it's a way of marking the coast and dangerous places, not unlike more modern beacons. So those are the visual sailing aids. But what then if you want to stay away from the coast rather than stay away from the if you want to stay away rather than stay close to the coast? Because the elephant ships were too heavy to anchor, We also know that by the late Hellenistic and Roman period, they would send large sailing ships all the way out of the Red Sea and across the Indian Ocean to India, and they wouldn't have time to put in at night, and likely they would also be too heavy to anchor at night. And the anonymous Periples of the Erythraean Sea, the author says that it's risky to set a course along the coast of Arabia. This is why, when sailing down the sea, we set a course for Arabia down the middle and put on extra speed as far as Kaumene, the burnt island. And here we have the burnt island like it is today. It's a volcanic island in the southern Red Sea. It's around 200 meters high, visible from around 70 kilometers, I guess, theoretically. And of course, if you have a volcanic plume above that, you can see it from a much larger distance than that. And the principle here, of course, is that the Earth is not flat, it's spherical. And when you get higher up, the horizon also moves further away, like this navigation handbook illustration from the 18th century illustrates. And from the height of 10 meters, you can see around 12 kilometers. From 100 meters, you can see around 35 kilometers. And from 1,000 kilometers, the view shed will be like 112 kilometers. And as I said, in some parts of the Red Sea, the coastal mountains are even almost 3,000 meters high. So I collected the heights of the tallest mountaintops on the Red Sea, around 80 of them, and I calculated their view sheds. I did it manually because I'm not that tech savvy. And then I added all these circles to see where can you actually see land in the Red Sea and where can you not. And the red arrow here is on the Jebel al-Tayeb island. So when you came down to the black region here, it would be the first landmark that you would be able to see, probably from further afar than you can see now if there was a volcanic eruption then going on in the ancient period. And I then realized that, like in the Mediterranean, you do have sections of the Red Sea where you cannot see land. And actually, rather than a threat, this would be a safe place to be, because as long as you couldn't see land, you would also know that you were far away from the shore and the reefs. So that's instead of navigating by the coastal landmarks, they would use the lack of landmarks to know if they were in the safe zone or not. I had a look at the port of Bergen, which, as I said, was the main Hellenistic and Roman port in this region, active from the 4th century BCE until at least the 6th century CE. It's nicely sheltered from the prevailing northerly winds in the Red Sea. That's why the port is there. It also has a road to the Nile Valley, which took about 8 days to walk through the desert. But the problem is that the coast here is full of reefs as well. But if you are at the port here, you would have the tallest top of the peninsula to use for navigation. You could then look for a small island off the coast here, and then you would have a larger island about 70 kilometers away from the coast that would enable you to set the course to the middle and the safe zone there. And perhaps even more so, if you came from the south, you would notice this island, and then you would know it was time to turn your ship left if you wanted to reach the port safely. So, I've spent my time now. I've argued that you could both navigate using different kind of visual aids, or you could also rely on the lack of visual aids to find your way in the Red Sea. and that is how they managed to find a way into Hellenistic and Roman periods in the Red Sea. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Seland, for this propping up a fairly disregarded topic. Questions from the audience, comments?
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of times that the heavier ships would not be able to put down anchors. Could you expand a bit on why that would be?
So we know from sailing with Arab-style ships in all of the way up until the early 20th century. I mean, these ships are still there actually. That you could safely anchor on these reefs at night because maybe the water is 4 or 5 meters deep. So you could just stop there off the coast and anchor your ship. But if the ship is large, it catches a lot of wind. So it's more difficult to anchor there. And if you have a stone anchor, which is in a rope, the sharp coral stones can easily also cut the rope, and then you are in trouble. That's I think the reason why it wasn't possible for these large ships to anchor there.
That was really interesting. Thank you. So I have a question, which is, do we have evidence of change in boat construction? As people are figuring out the dangers of navigating, especially if you're trying to pick up animals. Do we have evidence that they're using that knowledge to maybe create boats that are slimmer or lighter or more navigable?
We have intriguing evidence of boat construction from the region. We have texts explaining different traditions, including the sewn stitched boats that they use in the Arab world today. But from Steve Sidebottom's work at Bergen, you also have evidence of ships being built in the Mediterranean fashion in Egypt. And that would have to be with wood transported from other places. All the way back to the Egyptian period, we actually have the pharaonic shipyards that have been found there for the Punt expeditions. And we think that they finished the ships at the Nile and they carried the parts across the desert to the Red Sea and then put them together there. But one of the fascinating things about the finds in Bergen is that the pieces of ships you have are made in the Mediterranean fashion, but they are made with Indian hardwoods, for instance. And you have parts of sails that are made in cotton, which is spun in the way that they did in India, because there's a difference in how they used to spin cotton in Asia and in the Mediterranean in this period, which means that these ships were repaired and refitted in India, which is a very interesting proxy of craftsman mobility, I think, in that world as well. The elephant expeditions weren't a great success. It's I don't know if you know the story, but they did get a lot of elephants to Egypt. They had their trainers imported from India, but they underperformed in battle when they met the Indian elephants that the Seleucid kings had gotten from present-day Pakistan and India. And mind you, these are not what we think of as African elephants today, which are huge. These were a smaller species, which is called the North African forest elephant, which lived across the Red Sea region in antiquity, but which has long since been exterminated, I'm afraid. So there were different ships. I'm sure there was development. The elephant transports didn't have a very long life in this region, unfortunately.
Thank you for the lecture. Regarding the landmarks, the Temple of Isis or the Mountain of Solstice in Sudan, these are places where there's, I would assume, small settlements for people to worship Isis, for example, at least a trading outpost. So if I live in Bereniki, would I have a ferry service to go to the Isis temple or that small island you pointed out there and come back? Like how I have a ferry to Egina. Would such a service exist? And how often? And would it be more visible, more prominent for the sailors to say, okay, I'm in Bereniki, I want to get a good time, I'm going to this island, this is Mykonos, I'll be back, to active duty later.
Thank you for your question. Of course, as I said, there were people living there who were living from the marine resources or as nomads already. And I think in some cases, the Greek and Roman and Egyptian navigators, they would mistake what they saw on the shore for something that they knew already. And of course, in South Arabia, you had complex societies that worshipped deities and had sanctuaries and temples that Mediterranean people would link up with their own gods and understanding of it. But there's a huge surge for knowledge and resources in the early Ptolemaic period. I don't know if I would go so far as to call them settlements, but you find place names all over the Red Sea, from probably hunting stations or mineral mining stations that were made there. But I don't think they ever survived really as settlements. I think they were used for a period. And you can also track the progress of the elephant hunting further and further south into Africa as they exhaust the resources. And this actually takes place within the span of decades. But it doesn't work so well. And I would say after the 2nd century BC, the Ptolemaic interest in the region falls somewhat off. And then again, when the Romans come, they become very interested in the trade route to India to get spices and textiles from there. But in many of these places, there would either be corvée laborers, like the papyrus has said, with a crew that were hunting elephants and were waiting for the ship home, but it didn't arrive because it shipwrecked, and they write back to ask for a new transport that was found in the Fayum oasis. There are also descriptions of how criminals are put out on islands to hunt for gemstones, and then they only have provisions coming out once a month. It's been a really horrible way to live, I think. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you. I thought it was very interesting. Especially, have you tried putting this map with the viewshed that you have on top of the coral reef map? Because I thought it was very interesting how it seems to actually align pretty perfectly with where you have the corals, at least on the south. But I was thinking about shipwrecks. Are there a considerable amount of shipwrecks from the Red Sea or not? And if so, do they tell you anything?
Unfortunately, all you get is the cargo. Because of the organic material breaks down very fast in the water in the Red Sea. And also the cargoes are a bit difficult to find because of the coral growth on them over 2,000 years have hit many of them. But you have a few very well preserved wreck sites, I guess we should say, which mainly shows trade, or what has survived is mainly amphora from especially present-day Jordan, Palestine, Israel, and wine trade for the Southern Red Sea from the Byzantine period, like the Christian communities in Yemen and Eritrea. But then on land, for instance, from Bergen, you have some parts of ships that have survived in trash dumps, especially from the refitting of ships. So there is a little to work with.
Yeah, since the sailors back then were very interested in sailing in the deeper areas of the Red Sea, you talked a little bit about the sea life. And so I can understand that, they would be avoiding the coastal area once they saw, certain types of fishes or the snakes that you mentioned. But I'm sure there were also probably a sea life that was within that deeper zone that they could identify. Okay, we're on track. Apart from the things that they saw at very great distances, maybe they were also looking at sea life that live within that deep zone. So do you have some evidence of that as well? That that would be a good marker.
I think we do, because there were great whales there in that time. Also, I'm sure you know the whale shark, which is the largest fish, also lives in the Red Sea. And we have descriptions primarily in Finnish natural history and Strabo's geography of the sea monsters, as they describe them, that lived in the southern Red Sea. So I guess that would be an example of it. And traditionally, also the coastal population would use whale bones, for instance, to build their huts.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for a very interesting lecture about things I know very little about. You had many interesting points, and many more points have come up during the discussion. So it's well worth attending tonight. Now, I wonder, the texts, I mean, the Pericles and Archaeology and Hanno, do they ever speak about sailing during the night? Because in Homer, much traveling is done as a matter of course during the night, rowing and sailing. And of course, there are the stars. But is that any evidence of that in the text?
One thing is that they would have to sail during the night, because going all the way from the northern Red Sea to the southern Red Sea by ship, it would take you almost a month, I think, and then another month to cross the Indian Ocean if you're going all the way to India. But that, of course, is an argument out of silence. It doesn't say anything. But it does say that the sailing season starts with the rising of the dog star, the Sirius, which is in. That is also an indication, I think, of them using stars to. I mean, if you want to stay in the deep channel in the middle, you still need to know which way is north in order to do that. So, stars would be a way of doing that.
And we have a couple of questions online.
Yes, actually, we have one from Jürgen Meyer, but a very similar question. How do they navigate by night? And one from Anastasia Maravella was did lighthouses play a role in Red Sea navigation?
Or beacons, if I may.
Thank you both for excellent questions, and it's nice to have you there, Christian. So my idea is that if you're able to stay in the middle of the Red Sea, you didn't need to worry when you were sailing at night. I didn't say that, but the winds here, they blow consistently from the north to the south through most of the year. So if you were in the middle and you had the wind on your back, you would be safe, and you would be so far from the shore that when the morning light came, you would still have time to go back towards the middle if you had strayed from that course. And then regarding lighthouse, I don't think that's the expedition to Bergen or to Myos a bit further north that they have actually found lighthouses there. There is a claimed lighthouse actually on the coast of Yemen. That's the Soviet archaeologists found there in the 80s. But whether it really is a lighthouse or just a God's tower or a landmark on top of a hill, I can't really say. But of course, you had the lighthouse at Alexandria, which was well known. So the technology is certainly there.
Comments, or should we continue with a glass of wine? And thank you very, very much.